I'm Susan Heller, the Kosher Keto Maven, and today I'm going to show you how to make tallow. I have this big hunk, it's 4 pounds, of beef fat that I got from KOL Foods in Silver Spring, Maryland. It's easy to make. You need to do it when you're home for 4 or 5 hours. All right, let's get cooking. We're ready to start rendering the tallow. This 4-pound bag of tallow comes in several pieces, and it cooks a little faster if you cut them into smaller pieces. You see it has little pieces of the beef on it, and that will separate as the fat melts. You could also use a pair of scissors. And I've turned the heat on the lowest possible setting. After it gets started, you can turn it up a little bit, but for the most part, you want to cook it on low. You want to use a big pot. Especially if you have this much fat, you want to use a big pot. You don't want to fill it up to the brim. You want to leave some head space, like 2 to 3 inches. I made this before in the oven. Doing it on a pot is a lot easier, mostly because you have to pour the fat through a strainer, and it's kind of hard to pour it out of an oblong pan. Much better to pour it from a soup pot. We're going to let the heat do its work. Going to put a lid on it, and every once in a while I'll show you what it looks like. We're going to stir this about once every 30 minutes or so. All right, we'll see you in a while. The beef fat has been cooking for about an hour now. I checked it at half an hour and it didn't have very much fat. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to try and move some of the fat away so you can see down into the bottom. I probably have about 3/4 of an inch of melted beef fat right now. I think this is going to take longer than I thought. All right, I'll see you back in perhaps another hour. I'm back to check on the beef fat. It's about 2.5 hours into melting it. I'm going to stir it. It's looking good, smells good. I think you can see all the fat down there that's melted. That's the tallow that we're making. Looks delicious. Smells wonderful. Okay, so we're at 2.5 hours. Looks like it's going to be about 5 or 6. I'm going to put the lid on, and I'll see you later. We're about 4 hours into this. I'm going to stir it. We've got about 3 inches of tallow, and we still got a lot of fat left. Smells wonderful. I'll see you back here in an hour. I finished rendering the beef fat at about 4.5 hours and have been cooling it for about 2 hours. And now we're ready to, it's cool enough to pour into another container. As you can see though, it looks like there's still fat in there to be rendered. This particular batch of fat must have had a lot of what's called tissue fat in it. It's fat that doesn't completely render. It's just like the fat that's next to the ribeye. Like when you're frying a steak, a ribeye steak, and you have some fat on the edges, that fat doesn't completely render. It doesn't completely melt off while you're cooking your steak. It gets soft, and if you cook it long enough, it gets crisp. I like my steak medium rare, so sometimes I cut that fat off and fry it while I'm eating the ribeye, and then it's nice and crispy and delicious. So these white parts, these chunks that you see in here are that kind of fat. I don't know if you've heard of fat fasting, but this fat would be great for fat fasting. And you could fry it in a pan and make it nice and crisp and delicious when you're eating fat. So now what I'm gonna do is pour this in this container. It has a nice strainer, and it'll strain out any impurities plus this tissue fat. The tissue fat I'm gonna keep. I haven't done a fat fast, but I'm going to save it for when I get a steak sometimes that doesn't have very much fat on it. And maybe I will do a fat fast at some point. But for now, I'm going to drain it and freeze it. I'm sure you can hear it dripping. And when it's cool enough, I'll put it in these ice cube trays in 1 tablespoon measurements. And then afterwards, I'll be able to take them out. All right, so I'm gonna let this sit for a while and drip, and I'll even stir it a little bit to get all the fat out. This fat will have no carbs. All right, so I'm gonna let it sit now, and I'll be back probably within 20 to 30 minutes. I've stirred this a few times to make sure all the drippings would get through the sieve, and it seems like they have, so I'm just going to take this part off and pour it into a storage container and put a lid on it and just put it in the refrigerator. Next thing I'm going to do is pour some of this fat, oh, it looks beautiful, into this measuring cup and set the rest of it aside. It's cool enough now. It's basically room temperature. And I'm going to measure 1 tablespoon into each of these ice cube trays. And I'll put these in the refrigerator overnight. And tomorrow we'll remove them and I'll store them. They'll turn white as they chill. I have 4 of these trays, and each of one of these is 14 1 tablespoon cubes. Here's the lid. Snaps on nicely, snugly. And then I'll do the next lid and all 4 of these will stack. All right, I'll do the rest off camera. All right, I'm on the last one. And I'll have some left over. These will snack light nicely in the refrigerator. And this leftover, I'm going to pour into a container. I can store it in this container in the fridge and just use it gradually. Or I can remelt it and make another ice cube tray. We'll be back tomorrow when these are all set up. It's the next day and I'm ready to take these tallow tablespoons out of the ice cube trays. All I need to do is dump them on this piece of parchment paper. Okay, that's all of them. And I'm going to store them in the freezer in a Ziploc freezer bag. And I'm going to turn the top down a little bit because it's much easier to get them in. Then I'll just be able to take them out of the freezer as I need them. And the last one. So I have 56 cubes. Uh-oh, that one broke. 56 cubes of tallow that are 1 tablespoon each. And there you have it. I'm going to put this in my freezer now. It'll be ready to use whenever I want. I hope you use this recipe for tallow. It's fairly easy, and the benefits of tallow are almost immeasurable. I'll list some of those benefits in the discussion below this video.